a mountain road outside Kyoto. 3 bandits surrounded Ken before he could draw his second breath. He trained 7 years for this, perfect forms, recognized technique, the finest school in the province. The first bandit attacked. Ken's counter was textbook. Clean angle, clean strike. The man barely flinched. Came again, harder. Second bandit flanked him. Ken pivoted, blocked. His arms already screaming from 30 seconds of real combat. 30 seconds. His dojo sessions never went past clean, controlled 5-minute exchanges. Third bandit's blade opened his shoulder. Ken went down in the dirt, sword still in his hand, technique still perfect, body completely unable to use it anymore. A stranger stepped out from the tree-line. No school, no dojo. He'd been walking alone through Japan for 4 years, sleeping in fields, fighting whoever came. He killed 2 of the bandits in the time it took Ken to stand back up. The third ran. The stranger looked down at Ken, bleeding in the dirt. No pity in his eyes. "Your sword knew exactly what to do," he said. "Your body didn't." He walked away. Meanwhile, Miyamoto Musashi had survived 62 duels the same way. Not in a dojo, on roads like this one. Sleeping rough, training in mud, rain, exhaustion. A body forged by years with no comfort, no schedule, no safety. Here's what nobody tells you. Perfect technique in a soft body gets you killed slowly in front of witnesses while your form stays flawless. Right now, you train, you push, you show up, but something underneath still quits before you do. The samurai had a name for what changes that mushi. Are you ready to find out what it actually demands? Chapter 1. The Samurai with Perfect Technique. Spring 1, 64. Ekisen Province. Ken had been training since he was 15, 7 years. Same dojo, same master, same forms repeated until they lived in his hands without thought. His master, Fujiwara, called him the most technically gifted student the school had produced in a generation. Not empty praise. Ken's strikes were precise, his footwork clean, his understanding of distance and timing beyond his years. He was 22 and had never lost a formal match. What nobody saw was what happened after 40 minutes of hard sparring. His hands shook, his shoulders burned in a way that took days to fully leave. His grip weakened in ways he'd learned to hide. The dojo trained in sessions of 1 hour, clean, structured, controlled, technique refined under ideal conditions. Ken had never fought for longer than that, had never needed to. Then Isamu arrived. He came to the dojo on a cold morning without announcement. Older, maybe 35, wore clothes that had been repaired many times. His hands were wrong, too thick. Knuckles enlarged in ways Ken had never seen. The way he stood in the doorway was different from how anyone at the school stood. Less formal, more ready. He asked for a match. Fujiwara agreed. Educational, he said, to see different approaches. Ken was chosen. They bowed, took their positions. Ken executed his opening perfectly. The angle was right. The distance was right. The timing was right. Isamu moved differently, not better technique, just faster. And when Ken's perfect strike connected, Isamu absorbed it and kept moving in a way that made no sense. His body didn't respond the way bodies were supposed to respond. 40 seconds Ken on the ground. He'd never experienced anything like it. After Fujiwara asked Isamu where he'd trained. "Everywhere," Isamu said. "Nowhere, the road mostly." "Mushio," Isamu nodded. Ken didn't know the word yet. He would spend the next year learning what it meant. Chapter 2. Musha Shugyō. The training the dojo never taught. The warrior's pilgrimage. That evening, Ken found Isamu at the edge of the training ground. He was doing something with a thick rope tied between 2 posts, pulling, releasing, pulling again. His forearms looked like something carved rather than grown. Ken watched for a while, then asked, "What happened in that match?" Isamu didn't stop what he was doing. "Your technique reached me. Your body didn't. I don't understand." You executed the strike correctly, but by the time it arrived, you'd already spent energy managing your grip, compensating for shoulder fatigue, adjusting your balance on legs that have never been tested past 1 hour. Small amounts, but they add up. 40 seconds of adding up. He stopped, looked at Ken directly. How long is your longest training session? An hour? Sometimes 2. How long is a real fight? Ken said nothing. Mushayo Isamu said, "Do you know what it means?" Warrior's pilgrimage. That's the translation. The meaning is different. It means leaving the dojo behind. Walking alone, training without comfort, without schedule, without someone correcting your form in a controlled environment, fighting people you don't know in conditions you can't predict until your body stops being something you manage and becomes something you use. He picked up the rope again. The dojo teaches technique. Musha Shugyō builds the body that can execute technique when everything is wrong, when you're tired, when the ground is bad, when you've been fighting for 3 hours and your hands want to quit. Ken looked at Isamu's hands. How long were you on the road? 4 years. Musashi did it for longer. Isamu nodded. Musashi understood something most warriors never figure out. A dojo is a controlled environment. Clean floors, known opponents, fixed sessions. Real combat is none of those things, and a body trained only in ideal conditions will fail exactly when conditions stop being ideal. He handed Ken the rope. Try this 3 minutes. Ken lasted 90 seconds before his grip gave. That, Isamu said, is the gap between your technique and your body. That gap is what Shugyo closes. Chapter 3. What Musashi actually did. Miyamoto Musashi began his warrior's pilgrimage around 1600. He was 16 or 17. He'd already survived a battle that killed thousands of men around him. He had no lord, no school, no fixed home. He started walking. For the next decade, Musashi slept rough, ate when he could find food, trained every day without a dojo, without equipment, without anyone watching. He fought anyone willing, over 60 opponents, not one defeat. What most people focus on is the 60 jewels. What matters more is what happened between them, Musashi wrote later, paraphrasing his recorded teachings. I have trained in the way of strategy since my youth. Every day I trained my body. Every day I trained my mind. I did not separate these things. He conditioned his body through the pilgrimage itself, walking long distances in armor, fighting in real conditions on uneven ground, training his grip on whatever was available. His famous duel against Sasaki Kojiro. He arrived carrying a wooden sword he'd carved from an oar on the boat ride over. He hadn't brought his real sword, not because he forgot it, because he didn't need it. His body was the weapon. The sword was secondary. This is what Musha Shugyō produces. Not a man who can perform technique. A man whose body is so conditioned that technique becomes an extension of what he already is rather than something he executes. Modern athletes train for performance. Musashi trained for survival. The difference is this. Performance training optimizes the body under ideal conditions. Survival training conditions the body to function when conditions are terrible. Mushao is the second kind. Chapter 4. The Science of Forging. What was actually happening in Musashi's body during those years of pilgrimage? Researchers who study how the body adapts to sustained physical stress have found something that Musashi arrived at through instinct and necessity. The body does not adapt to what you do once. It adapts to what you do consistently under varied conditions over time. Dojo training is consistent, but not varied. Same floor, same opponents, same duration, same conditions. The body adapts to those specific conditions efficiently, precisely, and nowhere else. Musashi's training was varied by nature. Different terrain, different opponents, different weather, different duration. No session was the same as the one before. The body had no choice but to develop broad functional capacity rather than narrow specific performance. Grip strength is the clearest example. Studies on combat athletes consistently show that grip endurance, not grip strength, is the primary predictor of performance in extended physical confrontation. Strength peaks and fades. Endurance under sustained load is what determines who can still hold a weapon. In Hour 3, Musashi's years of rough travel built grip endurance the way no formal training could. Carrying loads over long distances, climbing, sleeping on hard ground, and rising to fight. The body had no option but to adapt. Bone density works the same way. Repeated impact on varied surfaces builds bone density through a process called Wolff's Law. Bones respond to load by becoming denser. Musashi's years of fighting on real ground in real conditions built bone density that formal dojo training never could. Not because dojo training is wrong, because it is too controlled to produce this specific adaptation. The lesson is not to abandon formal training. The lesson is that formal training alone produces a body optimized for formal training, and real life is not formal training. Isamu sat with Ken one evening after 3 months of supplementary conditioning. He said something quietly, half to himself. Musashi didn't build what he had in a dojo. He built it by refusing to stop when stopping was easier. Every morning on the road, every session in the rain, every fight against someone he didn't know in conditions he couldn't predict accumulated over years. He looked at the training ground. In times very different from this one, men and women will face the same problem Ken faced: skill that works in controlled conditions, bodies that quit when conditions change. The road looks different, but the principle is the same. He looked at Ken directly. If you recognize what was missing in Ken's body, walk this path with us. A single tap tells the algorithm this matters. Chapter 5. Kensia. Ken didn't go on pilgrimage. He had obligations, a dojo, a master, a province, but he changed what he did every day. Isamu had been clear about what Musha Shugyō actually required, stripped of the romanticism. You don't need to walk across Japan, he said. You need to do what the pilgrimage forces you to do. Train in conditions that are not ideal. Train when you don't want to. Train past the point where your dojo session would have ended. Build the body through accumulated discomfort over time. Week 1, Ken extended his sessions by 30 minutes, then an hour, then added rope work before dawn every morning until his grip stopped failing at 90 seconds and started lasting 3 minutes, then 5, then 10. It was not dramatic, it was not elegant. It was repetitive and uncomfortable, and produced no visible result for the first 6 weeks. Then something changed. Not in his technique. His technique was the same, but the body executing it had become different. His strikes arrived with more behind them. Not because he'd learned anything new, because the body delivering them had stopped leaking energy, managing its own fatigue. He started training outside. Uneven ground, different weather, no controlled environment. The dojo floor is flat, real ground is not. His footwork, perfect on the dojo floor, took 3 weeks to adapt to uneven surfaces. Once it did, his balance became something different. Not just technically correct, genuinely stable. He started adding load, heavy bags carried for distance, thick ropes pulled for time, rocks lifted and held until the hands quit and then lifted again. Nothing Musashi hadn't done by necessity on the road. Ken was doing it deliberately. By the end of 6 months, Isamu returned to the dojo. They matched again. This time it lasted 4 minutes. Ken didn't win. Isamu was 4 years of Musha. 6 months of supplementary conditioning doesn't close that gap, but Ken's body lasted 4 minutes instead of 40 seconds. And the way he moved was different, not the technique that was the same. The body underneath the technique had changed. Isamu nodded afterward. Now you understand the difference between training your technique and forging your body. Chapter 6. What Musha Shugyō actually demands. 3 things, not philosophy. Practice. First, consistency without conditions. Musashi trained every day. Not every day when conditions were good. Every day, rain, cold, hunger, fatigue from the previous day's fight. The body adapts to what it consistently experiences. If you train only when motivated, your body adapts to motivated conditions. Real life is not motivated conditions. The practice establish a daily physical minimum that cannot be negotiated away. Not a maximum, a minimum. 10 minutes of grip work, 30 minutes of conditioning, whatever you choose, but every day without exception. The consistency is the training. Second, discomfort as the signal. Dojo training is comfortable by design. Controlled temperature, known opponents, predictable duration. Musha Shugyō uses discomfort as data. When something is uncomfortable, that is where the adaptation is. The practice deliberately train in conditions that are not ideal. Outside when it's cold, longer than feels right with your weaker side, on uneven ground. The discomfort is not the enemy. It is the mechanism. Third, the body as the primary weapon. Musashi's duels were won before they began because the body entering them had been prepared to function under sustained pressure. The sword was secondary. The practice treat your body as the investment, not your technique. Technique without a conditioned body is theory. A conditioned body with basic technique is dangerous. Both together is what Musashi built. You don't need 1,000 days on the road. You need to do what the road forces consistently in imperfect conditions without negotiation every day. Chapter 7. The mistake most people make. 5 years after Ken's match with Isamu, a new student arrived at the dojo. Young, talented, same fire Ken had recognized in himself at that age. The student trained hard, sessions every day, technique improving fast. 6 months in, he asked Ken why his body still felt wrong in matches, like the technique was there, but something underneath it wasn't. Ken smiled. He'd asked the same question. "You're training your technique," he said. "You haven't started forging your body yet." The student looked confused. "Aren't they the same thing?" "No. Technique training optimizes what you already have. Body forging changes what you have." Musashi didn't spend years on the road to improve his technique. He spent years on the road to build a body his technique could actually use. He handed the student a thick rope. 3 minutes. Let's see where you are. The student lasted 80 seconds. Ken nodded. That's where we start. The mistake most people make is believing that training harder at the same thing produces different results. More sessions, longer sessions, more intense sessions of the same kind of training. Musha Shugyō is not more of the same. It is a different category of training entirely, not optimizing existing capacity, building new capacity through sustained, varied, uncomfortable effort over time. Musashi understood this at 16, walking away from everything comfortable. Most people understand it much later, if at all. The body you have at the end of a year of consistent, uncomfortable, non-negotiable training is not the body you have at the start. Not because you learned more, because you forged something different, the transformation. 2 years after his first match with Isamu, Ken traveled to another province for a tournament. He didn't win it, but he fought 7 matches over 2 days. Long matches, hard matches, against men whose techniques were as refined as his. And in the 7th match, his 4th hour of fighting that day, he was still moving. Not perfectly. He was tired. Everything hurt. But his body was still functional, still executing, still delivering what his mind demanded. The man across from him in that 7th match was technically superior. His body gave out first. Ken won. Not through better technique. Through a body that had been forged to last longer than 1 hour under pressure. He thought about Isamu on the road back, about Musashi walking alone across Japan, about 40 seconds on the dojo floor 3 years earlier, the gap between technique and body, the gap Musha closes. He'd spent 3 years closing it. He wasn't finished. Nobody who walks this path ever is. Musashi wrote near the end of his life, paraphrasing his recorded teachings. It takes 1,000 days to forge the spirit and 100 days to polish it. He wasn't talking about talent. He wasn't talking about technique. He was talking about what happens to a body and mind that show up every day in imperfect conditions without negotiation for long enough. You don't need 1,000 days in the mountains. You need what the mountains force. Daily training, no excuses, uncomfortable conditions. A body treated as the primary investment, not an afterthought to your technique. Musha Shugyō is not a program. It is a decision about what kind of person you are building. The dojo teaches you what to do. The pilgrimage builds the body that can actually do it. Musashi understood the difference at 16. He spent the rest of his life proving it. 62 duels, 0 defeats. Not because his technique was the best in Japan, because his body was forged to match his mind completely. Yours can be too. Not on a mountain. Here today with what you have starting now. Drop Forge in the comments if this changed how you think about training. Subscribe to Bulk Belt Discipline for Ancient Wisdom, tested by time and confirmed by science. New video every week. Ken had perfect technique for 7 years. His body gave out in 40 seconds.